On tonight's episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer, we are here in beautiful downtown Aurelia at the Kuchiching Family Health Team. We're talking to our friends at the Health Hub, the Trans Health Hub, learning more about what it means to folks in the area that are transitioning, the struggles that they encounter, the hurdles they have to overcome, and some of the successes that the team has been able to provide for queer folks here in Simcoe, Muskoka. So stay with us, it's going to be a good show. Welcome to the first episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis 2020. Yes, we are in a new decade and we're in a new space. We are visiting the Trans Health Hub here in Aurelia today, and my guest this morning is my good friend Carl. Welcome to the show, Carl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. So, want to just get right into things. First of all, Happy New Year.
We'll start with that.
But I want to get right into what it is that that you do here at the Trans Hub. Sort of give you the origin story of how things came to be here.
So there was a big lack of healthcare in North Simcoe, Muskoka. Most people had to go to Toronto at least, or there's a place that people can go in St. Catharines. So the access here was really, really limited for any kind of trans healthcare. And so it was, I believe, OSMH that got funding together for trans health services. And originally it was going to run through OSMH, but they asked Trans Health or Kuchiching Family Health Team if they wanted to take the funding for it. And I think it was a very short time that they had to get that together, and so they decided to go ahead with it. And we wanted to make sure that we kind of had everything covered. We have the nurse practitioner who does all the medical stuff. We have a psychotherapist for the mental health services, and we have me doing peer support.
Now, just for the audience, OSMH, can you tell us what that stands for?
Pardon me, yes. Aurelia Soldiers Memorial Hospital.
Okay, that's what I thought, but
Yeah.
I wasn't 100% sure myself.
Yeah.
So the team has been together, because I know I first heard about you folks, it would have been, I started at the Gilbert Center in 2018 in August, so it would have been that fall I came to, it was Muskoka Pride's AGM. They had me speak there, and members of the team, and I think yourself, were there and made a presentation as well. I think that was before you opened. So
yeah.
When did the center actually open here in Aurelia?
I think it was it's January, and that throws me completely off, right? So not last October, but the October before that is when we started actually like taking appointments. There was a lot of prep work before that because there wasn't a whole lot of like pre-made structure to go on, with nothing like this really existed beforehand. So it was kind of nice to be on the forefront because I got to do whatever I thought was going to work best. I didn't have a whole ton of limitations to work within. That's nice. Which is great. Yeah. It gets you're allowed to customize it to what you think is actually going to work rather than having to do it a certain way.
Well, and I think and I don't know the rest of the team, but certainly from what I know of you, you come from a unique experience yourself to be able to know what those needs are, right?
Yes.
So maybe give us a little bit of your own background and the reason why this center and the work that you do here is so important to you.
It's important for me because I'm a trans person myself, and I have experienced having a hard time getting health care. There's a lot of family doctors can do hormone treatment, but the vast majority of them won't. So trying to find somebody who can help you with hormone treatment is hard. Yeah. The doctor that started me moved back to the States, so he's not around not even available for that anymore. Limited people that you can go to for that. There's limited, again, all the doctors can mostly refer you for surgery, but if they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to do that sort of thing. So I've experienced running into a lot of the barriers in getting healthcare and all the wait times for the people who will do it, waiting for the kind of healthcare that you want and need very quickly. It creates a lot of problems.
I can imagine.
And so I've seen it with myself, and I've seen it with a lot of other people. I help run a support group once a week for trans people TransQ that runs through the Gilbert Center, and so I get to help people that way, and that was kind of what led to me doing peer support, was that I had the experience already sort of doing peer support in helping run TransQ.
So totally up to you how much detail and description you want to get into, but do you feel comfortable giving us an idea of your transition story and telling folks what that looks like? Because I think I mentioned this to you when we were talking about doing this show. I see this a lot in the advocacy work that I do. You always tend to be preaching to the choir, and I wanted to try as much as possible to get the message and the information and the personal aspect behind these stories out to white cisgendered folks that are out there that have absolutely no clue what it means to transition and all that entails, not only physically but mentally. So if you're comfortable in sharing those personal aspects of your story, I know my audience would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that personal stories, a lot of the medical and factual stuff is really important, but personal stories are what tends to really grab and
lived experience.
People.
You can't, for sure.
And so basically, my hometown is Midland, so I grew up in Midland, and I didn't actually figure out I was trans until I was around 19, and then there was a period of time where it was something like denial or sort of figuring it out. There was like a 4-year span before I told my parents, where I just tried to, various forms of, am I really sure? Or like, this sounds really scary, maybe I can just opt out of that. It doesn't really work that way, as most people find out.
Right.
And so I told my parents sometime around when I was 23. Moved away from Midland because I wanted to be in a place where less people knew me. I moved to Barrie, so it's not a dramatic distance. Some people still knew me there, but at least it wasn't everybody knew me there, which gave me a chance to start over. It was less of correcting people and more just, this is who I am, and you don't know anything otherwise, so there's nothing to argue about it that way. And then, so I started hormone treatment about 5 years ago, and I had top surgery 3 or 4 years ago. And I just basically, I lucked out in finding a family doctor who would do hormone treatment for me. Through TransQ, one of the people that helps me that runs TransQ found a doctor that was willing to do hormone treatment. So I immediately went to him because it was hard to find anybody at the time, and he was only taking a certain amount of patients. So I think that filled up really quickly. I only got him, he got me and maybe like a couple other people before. That was as much as he was willing to take. Mm-hmm. So, and because of the inaccessibility, I was gonna hop on that pretty fast. So I'm glad that now this makes it a lot easier for people. Now I get to help people with my personal experience, whether it be somebody who's transitioning. There's always lots of questions when you're transitioning. They get talked to me about, like, what was it like for you?
Right.
Or if there are parents who are scared for their kids, then sometimes having somebody to ask questions to is really helpful for them too. And this way, it's a lot more accessible. It would be easier if your family practitioner would do hormone treatment for you, because they can just do everything for you, but it's so easy for me when somebody's having trouble finding somebody to do that kind of healthcare for them. I can say, well, if your family doctor won't do it, I know somebody who will. And then I can just refer them.
And are those referrals generally still local, or do folks have to then go beyond Simcoe, Muskoka to get that sort of treatment?
It's local. The only thing that people really have to go beyond Simcoe, Muskoka for is any of the actual surgeries themselves, which it would be nice to have surgeons that are a little more local, but right. There's only so much we can do about that part. But everything else, they can basically come to us for, and we will actually travel to people, because transportation is a big problem for like LGBT people in general and trans people for various reasons, financial reasons, and there's just a whole bunch of us that don't drive. So we wanted to make it accessible. So we do travel around. We go to Muskoka, Huntsville, Gravenhurst, Barrie, and we will meet people where they are.
Yeah, and certainly in a catchment area this size that you have, very similar, I'm sure, to what we have at the Gilbert Center, you have no choice but to take your services to folks, because as you say, it's so difficult in an area as vast and remote in many cases that we have to actually get to folks. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat simple for somebody who's in Orillia to hop on a bus and come and see us, but Barrie, if you don't drive, especially Muskoka, if you don't drive, like there's no other way for them to get healthcare other than us going to them sometimes, right?
Absolutely. So can we talk a little bit and touch on during your transitioning, you mentioned was it 4 years roughly before you were able to talk to your family about it?
Yeah.
And what did that look like? Did you have the support of your family, and were they accepting? And obviously I'm sure they had questions and concerns, but overall, was there did they embrace you, or were there, because you hear all kinds of stories, right?
Yeah, well, my brothers were pretty much on board from the get-go. I didn't even have to tell them much. I didn't have to give them much information. They were just like, okay, and then adapted. My dad was on board really quickly. He didn't have a lot of information to work off of, but my dad likes to read, so it's really easy. And he just whatever YouTube videos I sent to him, whatever books I gave him, he just read it all. And I mean, he doesn't know all the vocab, and I guess nobody really does. But he learned it. And he adjusted whatever thoughts he had pretty quickly.
Wonderful.
Right?
That's wonderful.
And it didn't take him long. Like he tried really hard. He came with me for top surgery. I think my mom was otherwise occupied too. My mom had a little bit of a harder time, and I think that's just because I have 3 brothers. So there was just, it was a little bit of a curveball in the expectations I think that she had for that. Sure. So, but everybody is really supportive now. They all call me the right name. They all use the right pronouns.
Awesome.
What more can I ask for, right? So
that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think and we'll talk more about this later, because there's so much that happens here that this is not going to be the only show. Carl and I'm going to have other guests on the next episode talking more about the services that are offered here. But I think studies have shown, and I don't know all the stats or the numbers, and like you said earlier, that's really not the most important aspect of things. It's that lived experience. But I think it's very clear that someone who's transitioning, who has that support, even just one family member, can mean the difference between life and death in many cases.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference. The support, again, the exact statistic escapes me, but I know that having at least one supportive person in someone's life reduces the risk of suicide by a dramatic amount.
Sure.
And that's, it kind of makes sense, really. How are you going to do anything in life without some kind of support behind you? So.
Yeah, and we talk about chosen family as well in the 2S LGBTQ community, but I think there is something that goes with that blood family, that relation, standing behind you when you're going through something like that as well, that really helps to strengthen. And support is huge when you're making changes like that.
It is. It's even when you want the changes to happen, changes are just kind of scary, basically, right? So I can imagine for somebody who has less support than I did, it would be really scary. I had my family and I had my wife behind me for the whole journey, and so anytime anything scared me, it was always I had somebody to talk to. Maybe they didn't know exactly what I was going through,
right?
But there's something to be said about just being able to get stuff out of your head, basically.
Well, especially when, like, as you said, you were questioning yourself.
Yeah.
So it's difficult when you've got questions yourself and have nowhere to actually sort of bounce those off other folks and get an idea of where things stand.
Yeah.
That's terrific. So you're transitioning roughly time period from the time I know it's difficult probably to answer this question, but how long was your transition period?
I mean, there's always the question of like, are you ever really done? And there's like different markers for that, and everybody's idea of that is different. But like I said, I figured it out when I was about 19, and then there was like a 4-year period of questioning and being scared about it. And so it was about 23 when I came out to my parents. And then around that time I would have started testosterone, been on testosterone for about 5 years, and had top surgery in that time as well. So I don't do the, I'm not so bad at estimating time, but like it's actually interesting to look back at 20. So I've been, that's been like a 7 or so year time span, basically.
Wow. And what about the mental health aspects of that, and what does that look like for a person who's transitioning, and are there requirements to speak to a psychologist or psychiatrist, or what? Because I know some of the older guidelines, you had to have X amount of time sort of living in that perceived role before you could actually begin the transition process, and what does that look like these days?
It's not quite that strict. Like there is, it's basically informed consent. There is like a diagnosis for gender dysphoria that they're using, but their 1 year like lived experience rule isn't so much a thing anymore. There's some, like the requirements vary for like surgeries and things like that, whether you need to be on hormones for a little while and things like that, but a lot of it is just basically, if you want to go on hormones, you talk to like our nurse practitioner or whoever might be doing it for you, and they're going to, talk about your experiences. You do need to have, like, technically have gender dysphoria, so they're going to talk about like how long you felt this way. Not that you necessarily, like, there's this whole narrative that gets that is like the standard quote narrative of I always knew, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, I may have had those feelings for a very long time, but I didn't necessarily know what that meant until much later. But that's the kind of thing they're going to explore, like, what are these feelings that you have? Can we like get a kind of a better idea of what's going on? How long have you felt like this, and things like that? And there's criteria for it, but it's not as strict as like a 1 year lived experience thing, because it's not, that caused a lot of problems too. It's not always practical, especially when hormones will give you physical changes that you might need to be able to adapt to live for 1 year as was your gender that you're trying to, the gender that you truly are. I'm stumbling over that.
No, I get it. So, from the time you began your transition to where you are now, what sort of changes have you seen with respect to trans health, and not only the accessibility, but those changes in the legal aspects and whatnot as well when it comes to a person who's transitioning? Some of the hurdles that you may have had to jump are hopefully not hurdles that other folks have to jump any longer, but I'm sure there are still hurdles out there. So what sort of changes what's the evolution looked like, I guess, is really what I'm asking.
I think one of the big ones was making the surgeries more accessible, because when I was looking at top surgery, you had to go through CAMH. There was nowhere else to go to get the approval for surgery. And it's not really practical for a lot of people to go down to Toronto that much. And it's a long, like, the wait lists are long as it is. But you have to imagine the wait list to get into CAMH, then the wait time to go through CAMH.
CAMH?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Center for Addictions and Mental Health.
Thank you.
In Toronto. So you go through whatever requirements they have, which, could take maybe a couple of years, 1-2 years. And then you're going on the list for these surgeons, which could be another 1, 2, 3 years maybe. So that was a long time to wait, and a lot of people really can't deal with waiting that long. I actually took out a loan because I couldn't stand waiting that long, and it was really not that feasible for me to go to Toronto that much. I won't drive there. It was actually very shortly after I got top surgery that they opened it up so that all like qualified like family doctors and some other medical staff could do the surgery approvals instead.
Okay.
Which made it a lot more accessible. So now basically what we're dealing with in terms of wait times is wait times for the surgeons. So there's still some, like we need more surgeons doing it, and then we can reduce that a little bit, hopefully. But
so where can folks go for surgery now? I know Montreal used to be like the only place at one point, and now you're saying Toronto as well, and
Toronto, yes.
Are there other options for trans folk?
There's quite a few. The most common ones that people go to around here would be, yes, Montreal is one of the closest ones. Toronto Women's College Hospital just started doing some of the surgeries. They're pretty new. Mississauga, Dr. McLean. And there is somebody who just started working in Sudbury, the name of the doctor escapes me, but I've been hearing little like whispers about that doctor too.
And roughly, what do the wait times look like when someone is able to actually get the approval for the surgery?
It really depends on a lot of factors, but like the doctor, and I'm talking mostly right now about top surgery because that's the one that I'm most involved in.
Sure.
I think the Women's College Hospital, because it's newer, has less of a wait time, but you're looking at the one in Mississauga where I went to, Dr. McLean. He's not even doing consults for another something like 2 years.
Wow.
So there's a lot of factors in that.
Wow.
But yeah, it varies.
There's definitely a need for more medical professionals.
Absolutely,
out there, then.
yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yikes. So then, because I've seen firsthand trans folks sort of before and after, and their mental state while they're waiting for the surgery, and then to see that difference in that same individual after they've had successful surgery, whether it be top surgery or bottom surgery, is just, it's like a different person. It's like there's this joy that has just sparked in them that I never saw before.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to point out who that individual is, but I'm thinking in my mind of one individual in particular, and it's amazing how that surgery really allows them to feel their true, authentic self. And while I'm sure there are trans folks who have no desire to have any surgery done at any time, and that's cool. For this one individual, again, I think back to how they presented themselves prior to surgery, to how they now present themselves, and it's phenomenal. There's almost this aura around them now of joy that I had never seen before, and I've known this individual for a couple of years now.
Oh yeah, it's huge, and I've noticed it in myself, and I've noticed my wife telling me how much of a big difference it makes. Like, I love swimming, and I would not go swimming, not as often, nearly as often as I'd like, before top surgery, because there was just no really comfortable way for me to
present
do
yourself,
it.
right?
And it was like freedom. And I think the most interesting aspect, the thing that kind of surprised me the most when I woke up from top surgery, I've seen a lot of like top surgery reveal videos and things like that where everybody's like euphorically excited. And it's not that I was definitely excited, I was definitely happy, but the thing that surprised me was I was waiting for the like really high level excitement.
Right.
And what I kind of felt was, no, that's right. That looks correct.
Yeah.
Like it just looked proper. It's sort of like if you get like a tooth removed, you spend a lot of time being surprised that it's not there until your brain kind of clicks in and remaps itself so that you know that it's not supposed to be there anymore. And I just kind of looked down and I was like, no, that's what it's supposed to look like.
That's awesome.
It was really more like peace and than anything else.
It's like a tranquil feeling, right?
And then I went swimming as soon as possible. You have to wait a little while for healing, like you're not supposed to.
Of course, like any surgery.
Yeah, you need the incisions to close, and you're not supposed to like expose the scars to sunlight for a little while. But like, I bought like a rash guard shirt, and like it was almost too cold to swim. Like my wife wouldn't really get in the water for too long because it was really cold, and I was like, I don't care.
I'm going, damn it, I'm swimming. Good for you. So if you had sort of one wish for what else needs to happen to help folks who like yourself are transitioning or have been through transitioning or just anywhere along the journey of the trans journey. What needs to change still? What's the biggest hurdle that you want to see removed from this journey?
I think even with trans health services, just more access. It's hard to, I don't want to like, I'm stuck between the idea of more access for like more surgeons and more access for hormones, because they're both really important to, not to everybody, but to most individuals, right, for transitioning. So basically I would wish that the general practitioners would start doing hormone treatment. It's just regular medical care. It's supposed to be just regular medical care.
Right. What do the costs look like associated with that? Are these covered by the provincial medical care system, or?
Well,
like, is there a cost aspect to transitioning that is a hurdle for some folks as well?
I would say a little bit, like the actual accessing, like going to our nurse practitioner or going to a doctor and stuff like that, that part doesn't cost anything. The actual like testosterone or estrogen or stuff like that, the cost kind of varies because there's a few ways you can get it
around the system.
But yeah, and there are ways to get it covered, but sometimes cost is a little bit of a barrier. In my current financial situation, like a bottle of testosterone lasts me like 3 months and it's like $67, which for me is like not a huge deal. For other people, that might be a lot of their, it might be a lot of their money.
Right. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. I really appreciate your time spent with me today, Carl. It's been incredibly informative, your story, and the fact that you've been so willing to share the personal aspects of it behind it. I certainly appreciate it. I hope my audience does as well, because again, for me, this is all about reaching those folks. I'm tired of preaching to the choir about things. I need to reach folks who don't understand and can actually hear those lived experiences, because as you say, those are the ones that really, I think, are the most impactful. We can talk about stats and other things and have someone in here that doesn't have that lived experience talk about what it means to transition, but I don't think you have that emotion or that clarity behind what it means until you actually speak to someone who can share their stories. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. That's all we have for today's episode, but as I teased earlier on, we're not done here at the Health Hub. We're going to be back with some of your colleagues on next week's episode. And I hope you'll stay tuned for us next week when we're back here again with Let's Be Perfectly Queer.